Welcome back to session 2. We are seeing on the sources of soil pollutants. Our fifth source of soil pollution is solid wastes. Now, these are actually community household wastes and industrial wastes. So the solid waste we are looking at are actually from our households, okay, and also from the industrial plants. Now, some of these solid wastes are biodegradable, and other ones they can undergo natural decomposition process. For example, food residues, some old pieces of clothing, and also papers. Others are non-biodegradable. That means they cannot decompose naturally. Very good example of non-biodegradable materials. We have rubber, plastics, scrap metals, broken plastics, and plastic containers. So these solids are actually a nuisance when they are carelessly disposed in the environment. So generally we are saying that if they are not properly disposed, then they cause our earth, our environment, to lose that aesthetic value. In other words, that beauty derived from a given area is lost if this solid waste accumulates to very high levels. I'm sure you've seen some of the deposition areas where waste is deposited within the vicinity. Then the place looks completely awkward. This waste, if carelessly disposed, will also offer fertile grounds, or they offer breeding grounds for rodents like mice, rats, okay, other pests, and definitely other insect vectors such as mosquitoes. So these solid waste, if improperly disposed, will provide areas that are particular pests and breeding areas for mosquitoes that will transmit a lot of diseases within the community. The other one is broken glasses and also some metal pieces can cause body injuries. Okay, that's another problem. And then we have the non-biodegradable solid waste again. These limits, as they block the earth's surface, what happens? They limit soil aeration, and therefore they limit microbial activity. That means if you have a lot of solid waste on the soil surface, the amount of dissolved oxygen in the soil is limited, which again prohibits the microorganisms that are present in the soil that are responsible for nutrient recycling from taking place, meaning they can actually die because of insufficient oxygen supply, and consequently we are likely to have soils that are not, that are poorly aerated, meaning poor soil structure, and obviously reduced soil activity. Some of the control measures of soil pollution, it's very important that whenever you are dealing with the solid waste, they need to be sorted out according to the manufacturer's specifications, and then we need to use the appropriate method of disposal that needs to be applied. So one of the ways that we need to minimize solid waste management is recycling. We need to recycle solid waste such as scrap metals, plastics, papers, and glass bottles. Then we also need to have a system whereby the household waste that are biodegradable can be disposed. For example, food waste can be disposed in a compost pit to form compost manure that is actually vital for organic farming. That can be a source of organic fertilizer as opposed to the inorganic fertilizer. Then we need to have a system whereby combustible solid waste, For example, clothes, sanitary towels, and hair should be burned in incinerators. Now, incinerators provide very high temperatures to make sure that those wastes are completely broken down. And then we also need to discourage the excessive use of agrochemicals, especially when it comes to farming. Then we also need to have a system whereby we are encouraging biological control methods of pests and diseases that will minimize the issues of non-biodegradable elements being introduced into the soil chemicals and heavy metals. We should also encourage pipeline transportation of petrol and its products to minimize the risk of spillage. So pipeline transportation minimizes the accidental issues along our roads, and that can also ensure efficiency and minimize oil spillage as a source of soil pollution. Last but not the least, the government has to enforce appropriate legislation in proper solid waste management. So with this proper legislation, then the correct methods of waste management has to be put in place, and therefore we are able to embark on that. Lastly, we need to look at another source of pollution, radioactive emissions. This is actually nuclear emissions from radioactive materials, and these nuclear emissions can cause soil, water, and air pollution. Now, although nuclear energy is actually available in a limitless quantity, its harnessing, management, and risk of damage to life is very high. So we are saying that nuclear energy is a source of energy that is not limited. But then the challenge comes in the way it is being produced, how it is going to be managed, and the risk that is normally involved is very high. Now, nuclear energy production is actually based on the destruction of the atom, and we try to harness the amount of energy that is normally released when this reaction occurs. So the form of energy in which these atoms, the form in which this energy is actually released when atoms are destroyed or broken down is normally referred to as radiations. We normally carry out this destruction of atoms in industries referred to as nuclear reactors. Now, the radiations of these forms of energy, they have very great power, and it is very destructive if it emits accidentally. We have examples of substances that are used, broken down to release nuclear energy. This includes uranium, radium, plutonium, germanium, and the like. Nuclear pollutants are normally released to the environment from either nuclear reactors or nuclear plants, or sometimes deposition of nuclear waste, that is improper disposal of nuclear waste, or sometimes from remnants of nuclear welfare. So there are some ammunitions that are made up of nuclear material. So if there's a war breaks out, then the nuclear warfare can be a source of these nuclear waste that can cause nuclear emissions. Although it's a challenge again, we have uses, okay? We use nuclear energy as a source of electricity and propulsion of nuclear planes, ocean vessels, ships, and submarines. Now, the effects of nuclear waste cannot be actually underrated. One of the greatest challenges is that actually it increases the mutation rate, meaning that the emissions interfere with the genetic makeup that can lead to different abnormalities. Remember, these are normally inheritable characteristics that can be transmitted from parents to children or future generations. The radiations can also cause cancer, such as bone tumors and leukemia, and of course, excess dosage will ultimately cause death. How do we need to control nuclear emissions? One of the ways is by the use of clean energy rather than using nuclear energy. That means we need to tap energy from the sun, from the wind power, the solar power, as opposed to nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is clean energy, but the risk that are involved with the leakages are the ones that are more disastrous. Then lastly, we should encourage dialogue between nations with the nuclear technology in terms of management of nuclear material, waste, disposal, and the different aspects or different areas that we need to apply this kind of technology. Because if there is no dialogue between them, we could have a very disastrous scenario. That brings us to the end of our session today.